Breister,
Here.
Hayes here, Jones,
Here.
Net,
Here.
Strand, Usoman,
Here.
Churchill.
So we'll have a short moment of reflection before the pledge. Then we have the Pledge of Allegiance with Fondy High students tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So our first on our agenda is to recognize Kayla Tucker for her achievement as the first Fond du Lac High School Global Scholar.
All right,
Would you like to come forward?
so please come forward. Yeah, either place is fine. So we have Kayla. Welcome, Kayla, and
Hi,
congratulations.
That
And we
comes out
have
of the stand. There you go.
we have Mrs. Keck
Yeah.
from Fond du Lac High School.
Does this-
as
is this
well.
working?
That does work.
Okay.
So would you please tell us all about the Global Education Achievement Certificate
Sure.
and what this is all means?
A couple years ago, the DPI approached me and asked if I would be willing to maybe try to get Fond du Lac High School certified as being able to offer this new certification they had. It's about 5 years old. And so I agreed, and it's a 5-prong process, and part of it is the classwork that they take. And so I had to submit on the application various classes that Fond du Lac offered that would then fulfill the global requirement of the classwork. They also had to take 4 years of a particular language, and we offer 3 languages up to 4 years. And then there were some other qualifications. And so once we got certified, we started up last fall, and Kayla's our first person. And people, a lot of times, they aren't familiar with what the global certification is, and it's basically something that DPI created just to help our students become more globally aware and global scholars. You have to take coursework, you have to do some volunteer, like a capstone. You have to take part in various activities that have an international thrust. And then you have to write some reflections on 8 either pieces of literature or movies or films or something international like that. And what you get out of it is basically just the DPI acknowledgement, and you get it on your transcript, and you can put it on your college applications, your job applications, because we're living in a global world, and so we're just really proud that so many students have started this 4-year process, and Kayla's our first to graduate, so it's wonderful that you guys recognized her.
No, it's really very exciting, and honestly, Janice, when you sent it to me, it was new to me. I hadn't come across it, and Mrs. Uselman actually came across it at the State Education Convention
Right, yeah.
last
Yeah.
week.
Talked to them about, well, actually last year. I
Last
saw
year,
it for the
okay.
first time, at their booth, so, yeah.
No, it's very nice, and I provided the board with a packet of information that kind of talks about all of the various pieces that go into it, and
Yeah, and-
I can also, with your permission, Kayla, I can share your portfolio with the
Yeah.
board members, because Mrs. Keck shared it with me. It's very impressive to be able
Yeah,
to
it's
see,
fine.
I mean, the reflections in and of themselves, you know, and the pieces that you've engaged in, and the research that you've done, and the reading, and the thought process, and reflecting, really impressive. So we're just really proud of you and happy
Thank
for
you.
you.
Yeah, and not only was it just something I can put on my transcript, it's actually something that has changed me as a person, learning all these, just the way that people live in other countries and how lucky we are. Like, it's insane how other countries, they don't even complain, but we have, it's so much better.
Sure.
And I hope other students do it, because people need to be enlightened about this kind of things, and they just can't be so oblivious. Like, people need to know what's happening in South Korea, and even like, what is it, like the clothing industry, how it affects so many different international countries. And I just think it's really important for other people that just get out there and just stop thinking about us. It's gotta think about the rest of the world. It's important to me.
Mhm.
And what I loved is, because when I was reading her reflections and the other students' reflections, then I learned too. I mean, they're educating me when they're learning new things and researching new things and writing about new things and sharing them.
Right.
Nice.
Oh, it's very exciting.
great.
Wonderful.
It's very exciting. What we have for you, Kayla, is we have one of our Fondy Pride Awards, and Mrs. Usselman and I will come out and present it to you. Unfortunately, we don't have Mr. Drugella, who's our board president. He didn't sign it yet, so we'll take the picture with you. And we'll
Okay.
keep it. And then we'll get him to sign
get
it,
it.
and then I will bring it out to the high school.
Okay,
And get it to
yeah.
you, okay? But we can take the picture regardless.
Congratulations
Yeah,
and
that's
thank
great.
you very, oh, absolutely. Okay, we're good. I got 3 of them.
Wow.
Do you want me to do a video? Okay, okay.
Oh, that's my boyfriend's, yeah. Because he does a lot of so yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Best of luck to you.
Yeah, very good.
A great note to start off on.
Yes.
Mhm.
Following adjournment of the regular meeting, the board will convene in a workshop to discuss the pupil non-discrimination report, followed by an executive session for a mid-year superintendent's performance review as provided for in Wisconsin statutes 19.851C. So at this time, we're open to an audience, to visitors and delegations. If anyone would like to speak to the board, you can approach the microphone, state your name and address, and we will hear from you. Okay, seeing no one at this time, we'll move forward to the approval of the consent resolution agenda. So if I could have a motion on that, please.
I move to approve the consent agenda as follows. Human Resources, retirement effective January 20th, 2017, Julie Reese, special education teacher at Fond du Lac High School. Employment recommendation effective the second semester of 2016-17 school year, Samuel Johnson, 1.0 FTE, social studies teacher at STEM Institute at level 1. Letters of temporary substitute employment effective the second semester of the 2016-17 school year, Celeste Williams, 1.0 FTE math teacher at Fond du Lac High School at level 1, and Natalie Wondra, 1.0 FTE kindergarten teacher at Roberts Elementary School at level 1.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on any of that?
Congratulations and best wishes to Julie Reese in her retirement. And welcome Samuel Johnson to the STEM Academy in the Fond du Lac School District, Cardinal family.
Yeah, my little sixth grader's very excited he has Mr. Johnson as his homeroom teacher.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Anybody else discussion, or otherwise we can call the roll?
Preister,
Yes.
Hayes, yes. Jones?
Yes.
Net,
Yes.
Uselman,
Yes. Okay, so motion passes unanimously, 5-0. So the next would be after the workshop on January 9th, we have an annual procedure to designate spaces available for regular education and special education for next school year as required by Wisconsin Act 55. And we have gone through the workshop and we are ready to make a recommendation.
I move the Board of Education designate the number of available spaces for special education students for the 2017-18 school year as presented. Secondly, there's no designation regarding the number of spaces available for regular education students.
second.
Okay. Did you want to say anything about that, Mr. Siebert or Danica? Okay.
Unless you have any questions about it, we're happy to address them.
I realize this is a requirement that we were notified of. Was it October or November of last year?
Yeah, it would have been 2015, I think
Okay,
is when it was
okay,
originally. So last
okay, all
January
right,
they did
yes,
the same.
thank you. I appreciate your hard work, or we appreciate your hard work on this. It's tough decision to make, and you were very thorough on the workshop last week. Thank you, Danica.
And this is for open enrollment students.
Correct, so out of district open
Right, so
enrollment
people
students.
realize that.
All right.
Hayes, yes. Jones?
Yes.
Net?
Yes.
Reister?
Yes.
Uselman?
Yes. Okay, motion passes 5-0. So we're up to board and administrator reports. So we'll start with Dr. Siebert.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Uselman. So 3 areas for the board this evening. The first one is somehow the first semester is over, as Kayla well knows. Kayla graduated at the semester, so congratulations to you. The rest of us continue on into the second semester of this school year, and it's just going amazingly well and fast. So that's exciting, and we're looking forward to continuing a great school year. Number 2, we did have an inclement weather day last week. Funny to think about rain in January and all of that ice and the challenges that that created. Mr. Williams and I, for the past several weeks, have been talking a lot in the morning, and whether it's been fog or ice or different types of challenges. Hopefully we're busting out of that now, which we appear to be. But we did not have school last Tuesday, as you know. So the makeup day for that day, we have 2 makeup days built within the calendar, will be Friday, May 26th. Should we have another inclement weather day, which we hope we don't, but should we, that would be tacked on to the end of the school year. And then, as the board knows, once the law changed at the state level, where we no longer had to have a number of days and a number of hours, but we now just need to have a number of hours. Over the past several years, we've expanded the amount of minutes that we have at each of the levels, elementary school, middle school, and high school. So we do have time built in to accommodate any days that would go beyond 2, unless we would get into some, scenario where we would have, oh my gosh, I don't know, 8 days off or something like that. I don't know exactly, and hopefully we'll never get there, but we should be in a great position. That was not an ideal scenario. We didn't have a lot of choices a few years back when that was the law and we had to extend the school year another week. That was not good for kids, families, staff, plans people had. So we've put ourselves in a position where hopefully we never have to go back to that. So we'll keep rolling there. And then number 3, just wanted to give you some brief updates on a couple of relevant topics, 3 relevant topics actually. The first being the high school threat that we had last week that you were all aware of, and that has got quite a bit of media coverage simultaneously at the same time as the Oshkosh West and North threats. 2, I think, really important points to point out with that particular situation. Number 1 is how effectively the school, particularly the high school and the administration and staff, worked on that scenario along with law enforcement, the school resource officers, and the Fond du Lac Police Department. So from the time of finding out about the note in the afternoon, that was Tuesday afternoon, I believe it was, to that next early Wednesday morning, early in the school day, finding out and having kids step up and people communicate and having that anxiety wiped from people's minds. It's a very job well done to Mrs. Hagan and her administrative team, the teachers and the staff, as well as the students and the Fond du Lac Police Department. That was great. And then number 2, obviously you've probably seen the types of charges that are being handed down from the law enforcement perspective, and obviously we always talk about the distinct line between school and law enforcement, which is a different responsibility. But it's just important that in this time frame that we're in, that people really understand, and I know the board reiterates that, how serious these threats are taken and how life-altering the consequences can be for children that choose to make choices like this. So I think it's important that we just continue to encourage solid decision-making and reinforce our PBIS frameworks and continue to help kids make the best decisions that they possibly can. With the employee leave bank, we've talked about that on a couple of updates and a little bit, but not a real much in depth yet. Ms. Simon and Mrs. Lewis and I meet collaboratively on a monthly basis with Mr. Morgan and Mr. Girl and Mrs. Charland, and we are going to put together a committee with them as well as some representatives from our other employee groups, our custodial maintenance group and our support staff group, and look at what are the possibilities and what are the areas that we should look to address. The other thing that Ms. Simon brought up, and I had mentioned to Mr. Drugella, is that we would welcome a board representative on that committee as well. So he'll be talking with you and ultimately appointing someone that can serve in that capacity. And we will be able to start working on that. We'll have another meeting in February. Hopefully we'll be able to put the team together, and then we'll start working on it and looking at all of the pieces. We have some background pieces that we've already put together, kind of some of the considerations and some of the philosophical pieces that one would have to consider in order to think about what does that look like for us if we should choose to go down that path. But I think we all think that getting multiple perspectives and stakeholder groups involved is probably the best way to move forward with that. So that's how we'll attack that. And then lastly, we've had a lot of discussion in recent meetings about interpreter and translator compensation. And really, Mrs. Brockert and Ms. Simon have done a really nice job with that, as well as Mrs. Lewis with our overall plan. And essentially there's, I would say, 3 areas that have to be addressed. The first is looking at manpower, as you know, the contract with them and what it takes to get out of that contract. We now have that number. It's a very small number. It's a number of $2,000. So that is not a barrier to the district in order to move forward with that. Number 2 is working through the Department of Public Instruction on grant funding that can come to the district for this purpose. And we don't have that number yet. That will be a very important number, obviously, to know what types of resources come into the district to help offset some of the costs. And then number 3 is creating a salary structure or salary schedule for employees that would come into the Fond du Lac School District. Ms. Simon and Mrs. Brockert have put that together and have some ideas and options there. And what will happen is once we can get the number from the Department of Public Instruction, what we can do is we can then come back to you likely in a workshop setting and show you various ways to look at that transition and whether or not that number of hours is over 30, which includes benefits, or under 30 that doesn't include benefits, how many people we believe we can afford at the new salary range with benefits or not without benefits. Again, why that DPI number is important, because that brings additional resources into the district. So hopefully we should be in a position in February to come back to you with all 3 of those buckets filled, and then give you some options that you can select from.
Do you think we'd be able to put something in place for the next, start of the next school year? Is that the time frame you'd be looking at? Or?
That would be the goal,
Okay.
yes. Yes.
Great. And have you looked into what any other school districts are doing? Okay.
Ms. Simon and Mrs. Brockert have a
Great.
spreadsheet
Mhm.
of different districts and how they address it.
Great.
yes.
I really look forward to seeing that information. Thank you.
Me too.
Does anybody have any other questions on any of those 3 areas that I just discussed? We'll continue to update you as things become clearer on all of those fronts.
Sounds good.
Good.
Thank you for everyone for your work on those topics. Okay, so the next on the agenda would be the highlights from the State Education Convention. So Mrs. Hayes, myself, and Dr. Siebert all attended various events at the State School Board Convention last week, which ran from Wednesday through Friday. So if you want to begin, Mrs. Hayes?
Well, the attendance was very good this year. I think it's the highest that it's been. And it's been having good attendance the last few years anyway. I especially enjoyed a talk on trust and responsibilities of school board members. I thought the talk was really very interesting and had about 8 different characteristics that people who are in the public trust should try to uphold as they're in office. And I thought it was sort of an inspirational talk, and reminded me of sort of professional development. And I was impressed with the speaker, and I took notes. And I noticed another board person next to me on the board. I was with the board of directors. That person was taking notes, and then I noticed the other 2, because it was just sort of uplifting. I don't know if you were able to attend that session.
No.
But it was a general session. But I thought that was really good. I think another highlight, where there are 422 school districts which belong to the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. And another highlight speaker was Liz Murray, and she has been known in education circles for the book that she wrote, Breaking Night. And I picked up the book and read it before I went, and it was really, I thought, an outstanding book. But just to be brief on this is a student who did not like school, rarely went to school as in the elementary schools, and then in high school just never went, would show up enough to stay out of the law's hands, you know, that they wouldn't take her over as a state person under protective rights for her. But then, and her parents were on drugs, and her mother died at the age of 15. So I thought the book was really interesting because it taught me a lot about the drug culture and what people are facing, especially young people who are caught in houses like that. But then at right around age 16 or so, she decided, 16 or 17, she decided that living on the streets wasn't very easy. She did that after her mother died, and without a real home. And she learned a lot by having to sleep in stairways and other places and in the city parks, Central Park, etc. And she just decided that she'd turn her life around, and so she enrolled in a public high school, which was sort of like a charter school. But she took 10 credits every semester, so she finished her high school career in 2 years, and she got very excellent grades. And she, one of her teachers took them on a field trip to Harvard. I'll just tell you a couple of minutes more. And she was feeling the bricks of Harvard, and she was really impressed. And the teacher said, well, it's a long stretch, but you could always apply. And so she applied, and she also applied for a $12,000 scholarship given by the New York Times newspaper. And she got both, and she graduated from Harvard. And it was just a great story of deciding to turn your life around. I thought was really inspirational, and that she knew she could do it because she knew it would be easier than living on the streets and protecting herself also from other drug users, because this is a company that she would be. So I really recommend, if you want a really excellent book to read, it's in the library, and good book. Otherwise, I really enjoyed going to this convention. I go every year, so I must enjoy it by doing that. But I just meet really interesting people and have good conversations about public education and how we can do a better job, and it's just really uplifting to me.
That's great.
So thank you for your support and having me go.
You bet. Well, and thank you both for representing us at the Delegate Assembly, which I'm sure you'll talk about, Linda.
Yeah.
I had a relatively short time period there. I was a little worried about the weather still
I
on
was
Wednesday.
too.
So I didn't come until midday and went to our large district caucus that we have, a luncheon. That was very good. We had some topics around mental health, which is really obviously a challenge across the state of Wisconsin. You hear a lot of talk about it at a number of levels. And Marion isn't with us tonight, but we actually had some great training last Friday for our secretarial staff on that topic. And I think we're continuing to understand it and to do what we can to help provide teachers and professionals with the toolbox that they need, but there's a lot of work to do and a long ways to go. Talked a little bit about educator licensing, and actually this Friday we'll be hosting the CISA 6 region PAC meeting that they're called, and we'll be focused there. They used to always be in Oshkosh, now they rotate them around to different districts, and they pick districts to highlight certain things, so we've actually been asked to highlight our professional development opportunities that we have in the district and what it looks like from our new teacher mentoring and ongoing work with team leaders and so forth, Summer Institute. So we'll be doing that, and actually Tony Evers and Mike Thompson from the DPI will be here, which will be nice. So we'll be able to learn some more about some ways that there might be some changes in licensing that'll make it a little bit easier for people to get into education, and it'll be interesting to learn more about, I think. I then also went to, we had the opportunity to go to a night session put on by Davis and Kielthau on schools and school resource officers and the partnership, and the Appleton Area School District was highlighted in terms of how they work with SROs, and that was very insightful. And I went to a couple different sessions on strategic planning, because as we've talked about, after we finish the book study, we'll be ready to dive into a strategic planning process again, and just trying to get different ideas. I have kind of a vision of what it would look like, but as you said, Mrs. Hayes, you can get lots of different perspectives there, and it's interesting to learn from other people and some of the success they've had. And I think it'll be great if we can figure out a way that we can do a couple of different things within that strategic planning process as we kind of look forward to address some of our facility needs and other pieces, and bring some things together this spring into the summer into next fall will be great. So, yeah, it was, as always, it's a very enjoyable activity. The other thing I should mention is the WASDA Luncheon is always a nice thing too that I go to, and it's always recognizes the Superintendent of the Year. And this year, the Superintendent of the Year for 2017 is Damien LaCroix from the Howard Suamico School District, but Damien is I believe 1987 Fond du Lac
Graduated with
Goodrich
that.
graduate,
Mhm.
yes.
Yep.
So another example of a great member of the Cardinal family that we should be very proud of. So that was nice too.
Yeah. So I was there for the 3 days, and one of the big roles I had was being our voting delegate at the delegate assembly. So those of you who go, the board all got the packet of resolutions. All of them passed except the last one. That one was on gender identity, encouraging boards to take action on that. And I believe it was voted down because most boards have it on their radar, and they were just not looking for another recommendation that they, push them in one direction or another. So everything else though passed with flying colors mostly. So, and then I attended a number of sessions. Yeah, Liz Murray is the homeless to Harvard student, and then lots of things on law, and the legal stuff coming down the pipeline is always interesting to me. School funding and the effects of various programs on that, and teacher recruitment, retention, and diversity of teacher force. All those kinds of things were all very interesting for me to sit in on, and just kind of, it's great to network with other places and see what they're doing and just bring some ideas home. So thanks again for supporting me going, and that was
That's great.
fun. So
Thank you.
all right. So then moving on, anybody have student and staff activities in the last couple of weeks?
Well, I do. This morning I went to, because of the weather, we kept having to postpone the Board of Controls meeting, Board of Control meeting with CISA 6, and I'm the representative from our board, and then I'm on the Board of Control. And actually, they talked about the professional development program that's going to be held here in our school district on Friday, and they had really, the CISA director had really nice things to say about you and the program and how exciting they are to come and see our professional development.
That's
So
very
there
nice. Thank you.
must be some good words out there that are getting noticed.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Hayes.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Ms. Jones? Ms. Annette?
No.
Ms. Meister? No? Okay. All right, so moving on, anybody have additional appropriate matters that they'd like to bring forward at this time? Board members? Okay, and then our last audience to visitors and delegations, if anyone would like to step forward and address the board at this time, a second opportunity. Okay, and then, so we'll adjourn, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move the Board of Education adjourn the regular meeting and convene in a workshop to discuss the pupil non-discrimination report, followed by an executive session for a mid-year superintendent performance review, as provided for in Wisconsin statutes 19.85, paren 1, paren C.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Breister, second by Jones. Go ahead and call the roll.
Jones,
Yes.
Net,
Yes.
Breister,
Yes.
Hayes, yes. Uselman.
Yes. All right, so this part of the meeting is adjourned to the workshop in about 5 minutes. And the email,
Yeah.
what do we want to say about that?
Sure. Well, we'll just open it. So, the way this works, as I tried to point out, every 5 years, we have to conduct on our own a pupil non-discrimination self-evaluation. And then every 5 years, we have to submit an assurance to the Department of Public Instruction that indeed we completed that. So that, I have to sign off on that by April 1st to let the DPI know that we did it. Part of it is sharing with the Board of Education the findings of the study. And the last time we did this was 2011. Danica, it falls under Danica's purview and department. And both times we brought in a gentleman named Fred Skiba. Fred works for CISA.
I think he's independent now.
He's
but
independent.
yeah,
He used to be a
up in
CISA
Knoxville
person.
area.
Great man. He does this for districts all over the state on a rotating basis as their year comes up. So he's got tremendous experience with it. So we shared it with you. It's some of the things, I mean, maybe I'll just point out a few of the things that I thought were interesting, and then you certainly can ask any questions that you have. One of the things that was very interesting was that since we did it in 2011, overall, our enrollment has increased by 28 students since 2015, which is very modest, and you'd call that stable, a 0.38% increase. However, during the same 5-year time period, the number of students of color increased by 565 kids, or 44.1%. That's a pretty impressive statistic. In addition, the number of special education students increased by 345 for an increase of 35%. So I thought those were just interesting numbers because we've talked, over time about, I think Peggy has asked a question about have our special ed numbers increased, and you can see over time indeed that they have.
What do you make of those I mean, I noted that too when I was looking at it, and it's like, I mean, is the minority student number increase reflective of what's happening in our community, or if it's not, do we know why we've had such an increase?
Well, that's a great question. I think it is reflective of the community, and I think it's growing the fastest, as we can show, is our Hispanic population is growing the fastest. However, our African American population is growing relatively quickly too. And so I do think it is a reflection of the community. I think it's a reflection of Fond du Lac in general. We hear that people feel safe here, that it's a great place it's a good school district, it's a good place to raise your family, where you don't have to worry about some of the challenges that you might have in a large urban center. And I think what's happened and what we learned, and Sharon, please join me if you will, what we learn in Delft to a certain extent is people come to Fond du Lac and then they talk about it, and other people or friends of theirs follow and come to Fond du Lac in some cases, which is families, yes, which is kind of neat.
If I may just interject, my mom volunteers quite religiously for St. Vincent de Paul and goes in and does home visits. And I'm assuming, but I don't know for sure, if St. Vincent de Paul has data, but they have to answer a series of questions, the people they're interviewing, and so many of them, and in particular, single African-American women, talk about wanting to do better for their children, and Fond du Lac is their choice. I know that, I think, frightens some people that have lived here their entire life, but I think it's something that we need to be proud of when they're saying, I want to do better for my children, myself, that's why I came here. And that's from not only the state of Wisconsin, those that are moving here, but those that are moving from Illinois. And then as Jim said, they are mentioning that to their friends and family, and people are then, entire families are coming up here, so.
It's an overwhelmingly positive thing. It's just interesting, because I mean, we're here every day and we're in it, and until some of those things stand out, you don't, I mean, you can see it increasing, but you don't see it in that type of percent.
And I think Fond du Lac is trying to move forward to figure out how do we help these people financially, professionally, all that, academically.
Yep.
Yes. All
Coming
great
together
points.
as a community to support that group and these people who have ambitions to get them moving forward, I think that's
Yes.
a lofty goal, yep.
If you go to page 3, page 3 is where we just have a few minor tweaks of things that we need to do. One being needing to add the student non-discrimination statement to our employee handbooks and co-curricular course. That's easily fixed. Number 2, listing the complaint officer in both in just the Parkside student handbook, and has the complaint procedure but needs the student non-discrimination statement in the Riverside student handbook. So he goes through all of our pieces.
Wow.
To look for all of those pieces. So those are very easily remedied things that we can do.
I see that
Danica
there
is,
are-
oh, sorry, go
I'm
please.
just noticing here, yeah, we have a complaint procedure and officers, but we haven't had any complaints recently, and that's good. Good to see that too.
Right.
Who's the complaint officer?
Danica. The Director of Pupil Services position, which.
I would
Danica-
assume that our English as a second language numbers would be up then too from 2011. The English as
The
a second
ELL.
language, are those numbers up?
Yeah, I'm just looking at Sharon nodding, because I know she was just looking at some of
Yeah.
that data for the work we've been doing with translators.
Okay.
Right.
I can't give you a number off the top of my head, but
But,
the
yeah,
numbers are
I
up.
would have.
So we will certainly make those changes. You'll notice on page 4, there's a reference to planning is underway for academic and career planning scheduled for full implementation at 17-18. That'll be a nice thing to have a workshop on at some
Yes,
point.
yes.
And be able to inform you really how the high school is embracing that and what that's going to look like, where every child will have an academic career plan, which we think is a nice step forward.
I was really impressed with the 8th grade, what they're doing for
For scheduling?
for scheduling and, having the kids do an assessment and, where you can find where the jobs are, how much you get paid, and then the, places you would go to get the education.
Mhm.
So it was very comprehensive. I think that they did a really good job.
Yeah, no, I think it's great too. I think we keep getting better with our transitions between elementary to middle and between particularly middle to high. And you can't put a price tag on how important that is, because there is anxiety, certainly among kids and among families when you change levels and change buildings. And, comparatively to some districts, we have very minimal changing of buildings when we go K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12. In many districts, because of space concerns, you might have a 5, 6 building, you might have a 7, 8 building before you go to high school, so you might transition, 4, a couple more times. than
Academic
us.
and career plan, I think that's a nice idea. That was one of the things too, as we were talking about students of color at the WASP conference too. There's a lot of good programming along the lines of trying to really encourage, especially first generation students, to take AP courses
Mhm.
and get that participation up, because obviously the more that take them, the more that pass, and it's setting that higher goal.
Right.
And helping the parents through that process.
Well, and that's really what, a report like this, that's a great point, Linda, because that's what we're really trying to get to. I mean, what you ideally want is if 25% of your kids are minority, then 25% of your scholarship dollars should be going to students
Right.
of color.
Yeah.
And 25% of your AP course participants should be that. And there aren't many districts that can say that that's the case,
Right.
if any. So, I mean, that's part of the work that we do in our DELT committee that Dr. Jones is part of.
Right.
And it's, it's just an ongoing piece. I think it is important, if you look at page 5, and Danica commented on this earlier, that from 2011, when Fred was here, to 2016, when he was back, we doubled the amount of elementary counselors that we had. We used to have the elementary counselors share a building. Now we have the elementary counselors in a building, which we were able to do to get started through some grant funding that Marion helped us with. But since that grant funding has run out, we've made that happen because we just can't see that we could go back,
Yeah,
particularly in light of
reducing
the,
it would be
the earlier numbers that we just talked
Right.
about. Counselors are really, really critical, especially as they're doing a wonderful job implementing the comprehensive school counseling model, which is great. So, anything Danica, you want to say about that? I know you just said Fred was really impressed.
No, yeah, he was very impressed by that, because that was such an increase from the last time, and he commented, that a lot of schools are reducing counselors, and so he was pleased to see that we didn't.
Yeah, they play a very vital role.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
It's a line you gotta draw, you gotta cut some things with this atmosphere, but you try not to touch instructional staff, and then, I think counselors.
Exactly.
Well, and
Second
especially
list,
with
yeah.
the state of I mean, I think that was the Sunday paper, the first Sunday paper of the year was the state of depression and
Right,
youth,
mental
or-
health,
Mhm.
Yeah,
right.
mental
Yeah.
health,
The more
yep.
adults that are watching out for these kids, the
Yeah.
better.
Yep.
Very, you know,
Why don't we, I mean, you kind of get into where it talked about, sometimes there can't be findings when it's only 1 year of data.
Mhm.
And other times, high school achievement awards tend to be female dominated.
Yes.
Noon Rotary
Yeah.
participants,
Oops, did I say that
female
out loud?
dominated. Noon Optimist participants, male dominated, but, I mean, not to a point that, we're really
It
feeling
didn't
like
look
we have issues.
problematically,
No, no,
I'll
there's
just sink there, yeah, or
some,
you.
some findings there, but.
Yeah.
Danica, anything you wanted to add, or board members, any questions you wanted to ask?
Well, the Rotary and the Optimist, we don't really control that as a school district though, do we? Or do we recommend those students to those groups, or?
I think we do, I think we.
Oh, okay.
I think we nominate who, there's like in the Noon Rotary, for example, which I'm the most familiar, we have a Rotary Student of the Month, so September through May, there's a
Okay.
different child from Fond du Lac High School every
Okay.
month. But I think they are selected through the school.
Yeah.
Or are they, okay.
I would think so. I mean, and that's a good point, Linda, to, just bring awareness to that. And we will share this with principals as well, so that they can kind of see some of those trends. Sometimes you don't even know it.
Yeah,
until,
yeah, well, you're just
it's
thinking
down
month
on
to
paper.
month, you don't see the
Yeah.
big picture, this is, that's
I
why these
see
kind of things
that.
are,
Yeah.
nice.
women have to be good.
The
Do you have
Noon
any
Rotary is male dominated, and the Noon
Noon
Optimist is male dominated, and the Noon Rotary is female dominated.
Yeah.
Just swap out a few of those kids. and
Yeah,
we
make
can
a
be
little
okay.
shift, and we'll be okay.
Mhm.
You
I
go have
was
lunch
won-
here.
I was wondering on the activities, there, it seemed like from elementary to middle school, there's quite a drop-off in participation amongst on the minority category. Is that,
I don't know.
Well,
Is
no,
that a
I.
transportation issue?
That's what I'm wondering.
Yes.
Because a lot of the elementary activities are more
They're
like during
during
the school
school.
day or
Mhm.
immediately after school, whereas the middle school becomes more evening. But, again, it's a good trend for our schools to be able to take a look at, just to see if there are more things they can do. Tyson especially has done a lot of work with trying to get every kid in their school involved in at least one activity of some kind or another, and you can see that in their numbers, that they're quite high. So that'll be good data for them to take a look at.
And I do think transportation is an issue. It's a real issue. I think, some of our, for example, like our youth basketball, where we travel on weekends and we have tournaments and all those kinds of things. I mean, sometimes I think cost is a factor, although there are scholarship opportunities. But again, it's making sure that we're communicating with everybody in a equitable fashion, and that everybody's aware of the opportunities, and everybody has an opportunity regardless of their, all the things that it talks about in here, regardless of your
Middle school
background.
sports, do they engage buses for those kids yet, or is it parents drive the kids for all those?
Like to the games, if it's like depends on the sport. There
Oh,
are
okay.
some sports where they're bused to the game and back if it's
Okay.
a distance. But in many cases, it's on their own, where the parent, like if
Okay.
it's like sixth grade volleyball, for example,
Right.
they practice after school, and then it's their responsibility to get back for the games whatever time they are
Okay,
at night.
yeah.
That's how the vast majority, I would say, of, middle school
Anything that's
sports are.
rec league,
Rec league is all.
all rec league would be
That's all
parents.
parents,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
I think the one other thing that I would point out too, like the sample of elementary school activities, I'm not certain, but I know like for sure, for example, like Parkside was one of the schools that gave us data on that, so that's not a compilation of all elementary schools, but a specific one. And I do think that, like with Parkside, things like the Boys and Girls Club right after school activity was part of it, and so you may see some higher numbers there just because of the schools that provided us with information, whereas Tyson with 15.3% being minority, that may be pretty representative of their minority population within Tyson.
Okay.
Any other questions that you have?
Okay. Well, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn to the executive session.
I move the Board of Education adjourn the workshop and convene in an executive session for a mid-year superintendent performance review as provided for in Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent Z. C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility.
Second.
Motion by Hayes, or motion by Jones, second by Hayes. And we'll do the roll call.
Reister,
Yes.
Hayes, yes. Jones,
Yes.
Net,
Yes.
Uselman.
Yes. All right, so this workshop is adjourned.